Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
80,000 feet in the air, illuminated by the searchlights then disappearing into the darkness, the B-14 Liberator and B-29 Superfortress strategic bombers appeared over the city like a surrealist nightmare. Sinister, black, enormous moths, the poet Albert Giraud had written, with heavy wings fall invisibly, the monstrosities upon human hearts. 50,000 people were displaced by the bombing of Shanghai on the 6th of February 1950. Homes and infrastructure were leveled, and 1,000 people, perhaps more, were killed or injured. The key target of the American-made bombers was the American-owned and American-operated Shanghai Power Company. It was a multinational of critical importance which powered the new revolutionary communist People's Republic of China. Even as the United States protested Taiwan's air raids in public, the government of President Harry Truman knew they were critical to his policy to contain communism. Declassified documents show that the Central Intelligence Agency reported to Washington that a large number of ships were being fitted at Shanghai's dockyards for an imminent invasion of Taiwan. Even after the bombing of the docks by the American-made bombers, armies of workers continued to repair damaged junks and prepare for war. This week, the People's Liberation Army's combat jets and ships have launched around-the-clock exercises again, intended to intimidate Taiwan's new pro-independence president Lai Ching-te. To many experts, it seems an eventual invasion of Taiwan by the People's Republic is inevitable. Like in 1950, debates are raging on whether to deter China by containment, as President Truman wanted, or through engagement, as the magnates running Shanghai Power argued. The long-forgotten story of the Shanghai Power Company and the bombers sent to destroy it offers us important lessons. It tells us about the missteps and misjudgments that could push two superpowers into a war neither nor the world wants. Ever since November 1948, when the PLA broke out of northern China and began pushing down the lower Yangtze River, Paul Hopkins had been carefully considering his options. The president of Shanghai Power had early on told his headquarters in the United States that it should continue operations only as long as the Kuomintang regime held the city. That month, though, the US Embassy had issued an advisory telling non-essential personnel to leave Shanghai, making clear the government's collapse was nearing. For diplomats, the prospect of Shanghai Power shutting down was not a welcome one, historian Walter Tozer has recorded. The United States consul in Shanghai, John Cabot, told Hopkins that the communists would also need electricity. The company's influence, he argued, might enable it, I quote, to lead, guide, or otherwise induce the Reds to revise their philosophy of life. Warren Kopelman, Hopkins' boss in Boise, also told him American authorities in Washington were very keen for the company to stay on. The government, Kopelman was told, I quote, emphasized the desirability of continuing operations regardless of who was in power in China. They indicated that they would be very disappointed if the property got out of American hands. The idea that continued operations by Shanghai Power would be welcomed by the communists was pretty commonsensical. The company generated about 87% of the city's power, according to Tozer, and continued operations were necessary to keep China's industrial powerhouse going. There were, however, some pretty serious problems. Who would guarantee continued fuel supplies to the plant? And how would the power be paid for? Even though Washington ensured Shanghai Power continued its operations, It also mounted pressure on China. The retreating Kuomintang began a blockade of Shanghai port, cutting off fuel supplies with the assent of the United States. This led Shanghai Power to switch to coal, which the communist regime had to bring in despite airstrikes. The People's Republic also raised power tariffs to ensure Shanghai Power could keep going. It even gave loans to the company to ensure smooth operations. This, the historian John Service has argued, was because Chairman Mao Zedong's revolutionary government was, contrary to popular opinion, keen to maintain an open door to the United States. In other words, to maintain a trade relationship in the face of all the ideological problems and the reality of American support for the Kuomintang in Taiwan. The government's support for Shanghai Power suggests that John Service is right on this point. However, subsequent events ensure we can only speculate about what might have happened if Shanghai Power stayed on. Following the liberation of Taiwan from Imperial Japan, the Kuomintang established an iron hold on the island. The unpopularity of the Kuomintang's rule, scholar John Hubner writes, soon sparked off riots, and thousands were killed in the murderous military action that followed. The US, though, had no choice but to keep backing the Kuomintang. Taiwan, after all, was critical in maintaining a naval line of defense against the Soviet Union, running all the way from Japan through the Philippines and Indonesia. Truman, inspired by Cold War diplomats and ideologues Dean Acheson and George Kennan, conceded China to the Soviet Union, but he hoped to minimize its utility as an industrial powerhouse or resource base, the historian Warren Cohen has noted. US commercial traffic was caught up in the Kuomintang's blockade, and airstrikes on Shanghai Power's facilities began in January 1950. Washington, thus, chose to pay a price for its strategic objectives. Few in the State Department seem to have been entirely persuaded by the containment policy. The director of the Office of Chinese Affairs, Philip Sprouse, wrote in a secret memorandum that, I quote, the bombings are fast producing what the Consulate General describes as a state approaching chaos with attendant danger to the American residents of Shanghai. To Sprouse, it seemed incredible that we permit the Kuomintang Chinese government brazenly to do the damage to our position in China that it is doing. For its part, Hubner wrote, the PLA continued to push on through 1949, with the 3rd Field Army taking the Kuomintang naval base at Fuzhou in August. Early in October 1949, 3 PLA divisions assaulted Kuomintang positions on the island of Xiamen, part of Taiwan's outer defenses. The assault, however, ended in disaster, with the PLA proving unable to mount an amphibious operation. In Shanghai, Hopkins had developed a growing respect for the new government. The communists, he wrote, were, I quote, a new type of people who, if not subject to outside pressure, will ultimately bring great progress to China. For its part, Shanghai Power, again I quote, earned and won the confidence of the authorities as an efficient and honestly administered utility and one of the essential cogs in Shanghai's industrial development. But the deteriorating relationship between Beijing and Washington was inevitably to take its toll on this commercial relationship. In September 1950, Shanghai Power handed over management to local employees and quietly left China forever. Following the outbreak of the Korean War in the summer of 1950, commentator Su Chung Mao writes, the PLA dropped its plans to attack Fujian, plans which, according to most American diplomats, would have delivered a death blow to the Kuomintang at that time. The conflict, however, simmered on. In August 1954, the PLA again raided Taiwan's offshore islands, beginning with the shelling of Kinmen and Matsu and an assault on the Dachshunds. That November, the PLA encircled Yangshan, a base on the northern flank of the Dachshunds, and occupied the islands. The United States responded by sending in 7 aircraft carriers at the head of a fleet that evacuated some 15,000 civilians and 11,000 Taiwanese troops. In December 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower's government signed a formal mutual defense treaty with Taiwan, which was enforced in March of the next year. Although the Dachshund Islands were successfully captured by the PLA and remain in the control of China even today, it could move no further without risking war with the United States. In August 1958, the PLA tested that proposition and American resolve, shelling the islands of Kinmen and Matsu again and initiating an amphibious landing on Chongqing. This time, the United States sent in a fleet with 4 aircraft carriers equipped with low-yield atomic weapons, threatening to annihilate the PLA's numerically superior landing forces if they didn't retreat. The threat worked. Ever since President Xi reinitiated an aggressive Taiwan policy, debates on engagement and deterrence, which raged in the 1950s, have acquired a new significance. Trade and technology sanctions against China have deepened, together with direct military competition. The eminent strategic affairs scholar John Mearsheimer, among others, has argued that the rise of China, enabled, as you know, by the United States itself, made this confrontation inevitable. The only way for the United States to eventually prevail, he argues, is to relentlessly focus on expanding the power gap. That's the power gap between commercial capabilities, between technology, and between military capacity, to the point where China realizes it has no chance of winning this superpower competition. Mearsheimer might be right, but the case of Shanghai power shows the importance of nuance and to explore other options. Keeping the corporation running, enabling fuel supplies, and bringing other economic incentives to the table might well have also provided tools to temper the PLA's push on Taiwan. Ending engagement in 1949, conversely, did not enhance the security of Taiwan and led step on step to the crisis we have today. Even a limited war over Taiwan, economists have estimated, would cost the world up to $10 trillion or 10% of global GDP, devastating livelihoods across the world. That cost in itself is an excellent reason for both adversaries to pull back from the brink they're headed to. Engagement might not be a substitute for raw deterrence and power. Ensuring the economies of China and the world remain entwined, though, will provide a powerful force for peace. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching Security Code.